Well, good afternoon, everyone. So glad you all could join us today for our live event. I am Keely O'Sullivan-Kurtz. I'm an advanced CNP, and I am the director of CNP programs at the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. I'm going to quickly, I see some people are adding in the chat where you all are calling in from. I'm reaching you all from Kansas City, Missouri. I know some of our friends on the West Coast, particularly the Seattle area, are dealing with some windstorms from last night, so I'm grateful that those folks can join us. So today's session is brought to you by the Association of CNPs, in particular, the Executive Committee. One way the association supports its CNP and ACNP community is holding professional development, continuing education, and networking events like this one. We do plan on having another free live event for nonprofit professionals and nonprofit learners in January. So more information will come out on that very soon. I have to mention though, as we're getting to the end of 2024 and gearing up for 2025, the Alliance is preparing to host our Elevate conference. This 3-day virtual conference will take place February 25th through 27th in 2025. It'll be 3 days of hundreds of excellent nonprofit professionals learning from nationally recognized thought leaders, sharing resources, and really exploring what it means to be a leader in the nonprofit sector. We'll put the link to Elevate in the chat so you can learn more and register with our early bird rate. So look for that in the chat. So enough about Elevate 2025. Let's talk about today's panel. We are going to kick off with some brief introductions from our moderator and our panelists. And then after that, they will dive into a lively discussion about their fundraising experiences, and they'll share some of their practical wisdom with you. Our panelists are eager to hear from you. So during their conversation, please feel free to add your questions to the chat and they'll get to them. So now it is my pleasure to welcome to the virtual stage today's moderator, Chad Barger. Welcome, Chad.
Great, thank you, Keely. Great to be here. We planned this a long time ago, so it's exciting that the day is finally here. The thinking was like, we should do a fundraising session, but we can do a niche topic, but maybe let's do a fundraising session where we hear from people that have been doing this a really long time and hear just like what it's like, what has been, some lessons learned. I feel like we get that every once in a while, but there's just a much bigger opportunity to learn from each other. So I'm excited we're here. We're going to do that. I have some questions for everybody, but first we're going to kick it off with, briefly introduce yourself, share your journey in the fundraising field, and maybe if you have a key moment or decision that kind of helped shape your career, if you want to incorporate that, that's great. I'll kick us off. My name's Chad Barger. All I've ever done is fundraise. Started as a phone-a-thon caller in college, got my CNP in college as part of that, and then had a 20-year frontline fundraising career, primarily in higher education and the arts. I have a CFRE, a Certified Fundraising Executive, and recently achieved my Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive. So yes, we all like to collect letters if you haven't figured that out. So that's there, and I'm just excited to be here. And these days I spend my time with my firm, Productive Fundraising, providing fundraising training and coaching for small to mid-sized nonprofits. So with that, I'm gonna toss it over to Andrea to do her introduction.
Thank you, Chad. So my name is Andrea Hill, and I am the Chief Development and Partnership Officer for Tennessee Nonprofit Network. And so I see in the chat, I'm already shouted out, there's a lot of Tennessee folks, and Tennessee is great. So now we can move on. I have been in the nonprofit space for probably about 20 years, or a little over 20 years. And a lot of the work that I've done has been in volunteer management, program development, events planning, and also just a little bit of fundraising, I would guess you could say. Well, and I'll tell you a little story and then I'll turn it over. Now, those of you from Tennessee know we could tell stories. I'll keep this one short. But how I really fell into fundraising, it was really out of necessity. And so if we could see the thumbs up of why is probably your story too around necessity, I'll share mine. So I've been working in volunteer management, and particularly this example, and people were like, oh, they'll just volunteer. Oh, they don't really need much. They'll just come and help and do what they need to do. And how many of you all know that if you run a volunteer program, you actually need a budget to run that volunteer program? And so where I found that we had a lot of impact, we had a lot of volunteers coming in, we had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours and volunteers coming in to do a number of different projects over the course of my tenure at my organization. I needed a budget. And so I started fundraising and finding people who would give to the food pantry project that we were doing, or to the MLK Days of Service project that we were doing. And from that, it just kind of spitballed into, well, I think I kind of like this fundraising thing. Let me figure out a little bit more about it. And so that kind of moved me into getting my CFRE, and then now in my position at Tennessee Nonprofit Network, being a full-time fundraiser and partnerships officer. So that's my story in short, and I'm sure, much like many of y'all, your story might be a little bit similar. So, but let me turn it back to Chad, or turn it over to Ian. Can I turn it over to Ian?
That'll work. We can
All right.
on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea. Chad, it's always good to be here with so many good friends and people I've known for a long time, and obviously supporting the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance is one of my favorite organizations, and definitely some of the amazing professional development they do in the sector. My name is Ian Adair. I'm the new president and CEO of the Seattle Police Foundation. I just started this role 7 weeks ago. Moved cross country with the family, so I'm still very much in learning, and we'll call it evaluation mode with everything going on in the organization. I came here after spending a couple of years at AFP, the global office, as the Director of Leadership Development and Credentialing. And before that, I ran a foundation that supported the largest behavioral health organization in the state of Florida. So this is my fourth opportunity to lead an organization. All 4 missions I feel like I have some deep connection to, or some connection to. And so I'm excited to be here to have this opportunity. Some key moments, I'll kind of look at that. As I look back, I think I started early on in my college career, similar to a lot of folks. I had I think an internship the summer after my junior year that really pushed me in the direction of grassroots organizations, youth development programming, nonprofit work. I was exposed to fundraising like a lot of people did, through like programmatic grants that were for low amounts to pay for equipment and try to get things off the ground, or maybe some small events to help raise money for programming. I think for some people, program grants are always kind of the gateway into larger fundraising and larger ask, and before you start slowly working more with individual donors. I think the biggest moment, I believe, in terms of fundraising, that was kind of a shift in my career, is when I shifted from program work to administrative work. And that's when the focus came a lot more about organizational fundraising and really looking at finding the right balance for an organization in terms of funding streams. And it's just kind of gone on from there. And I've enjoyed an amazing career in both education and nonprofit. So excited to be here. Thank you so much. And now I want to turn it over to my friend Allison.
Thanks so much, Ian, and thanks for just being part of this. I'm really excited to offer some insights. My name is Dr. Allison Quintanilla Plattsmier. I am the Executive Director of Empowering Neighborhood Partnerships, which is a small grassroots organization in Nashville that looks at food security, youth empowerment, and affordable housing from a neighborhood perspective. So neighbors doing what neighbors do. I also run AQP Consulting, where I do fundraising strategy, grant writing, board development, and strategic planning for small shop nonprofits, helping them scale to their first staff member or second staff member. I became a CNP in 2017 and an ACNP pretty much as soon as they opened it. So I've long been involved with Nonprofit Leadership Alliance and used to serve on the Association of CNPs executive committee. So I'm excited to be a part of this. In terms of my fundraising kind of career, I'm one of those people that kind of knew I wanted to be a fundraiser since I was a kid. And so, but my epiphany moment was I was 16 and there was a Diana DeGarmo benefit concert. I think she was 23 at the time, and she raised $400,000 for her cause. And I was like, wouldn't that be awesome? You know, like being able to use your talent to raise a bunch of money for something you're really passionate about. And so I kind of had this like, you know, if I were to walk across the street and get hit by a bus tomorrow, like, would I be happy with the impact that I've made in the lives of other people? And I decided no. And so I started signing up for everything I could get my hands on through Hands On Nashville, and ended up being a team leader for the Tennessee Kidney Foundation's Gift of Life Walk. And they were doing a school challenge. And so I got really competitive with my high school and fundraising funds through that. And there was another team leader, her name was Katie. She was 17 years old. And at the time had a life expectancy of 24. So she needed a kidney transplant pretty soon, or things were going to go bad. And I think being able to see like the immediate impact that the dollars we were raising was going to Katie's life and her potential to live a longer life, I think was just really impactful for me, and showed me, you know, we get to build relationships, we get to raise money, and we get to immediately see what that money does for impacting people's lives. And so that's kind of when I fell in love with fundraising.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Allison. Amazing stories, all different paths. That's always what I find with fundraising and really nonprofit in general. We all have a story for why we're here, and it's all a circuitous path that gets us there and lets us lead with that passion. So great. We do have some current folks that are pursuing their CNP. We have some college students. We have some young executives, some folks that maybe had 20 years doing something else and are now got the calling to come and raise money for something they care deeply about. So next question just kind of looks at like, what would you suggest to help them get to where they need to go? So what skills do you believe are crucial for someone entering the fundraising profession today? Are there any certifications, courses, subscriptions, anything that you recommend that has been very beneficial to you? And why don't we go right back and start with Allison this time? So.
Thank you, Chad. Yeah, I would say on the credentials, CFRE is definitely something that I would highly recommend, a certified fundraising executive, because it gives you a baseline to, I think, learn knowledge about areas of fundraising that you might not have a chance to get exposed to in larger organizations. So for me, that was really essential. Working in small shops, you know, I might not have gotten the opportunity to do like major gifts or planned giving. So I got to learn that from an education side. I also, if you're more on the grant side, there is the grant professional certification, GPC. And then there's also the CAP, the Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy, which is more like planned giving and estate planning type work. So those are some options on the certification side. And then in terms of kind of like building like into a fundraising career, I think that I was able to get in because I had done like a lot of volunteer work. I'm sure it can be really frustrating as a younger professional that you always have this like wheel of need experience to get experience type situation. And so participating in some of that like peer-to-peer fundraising or serving on boards gave me opportunities to kind of get those wins from a fundraising perspective that I could then talk about before I had like that professional experience. So I really took advantage when I was in college of like sitting on student executive boards and things like that, so that I had kind of things in my portfolio that I could speak to.
Great, thank you, Allison. Let's go to Andrea.
I would add some of the same things that Allison shared. I would also think about the volunteer opportunities that you have, like you shared. Junior League of Memphis here is an organization that I'm a member of, and so this last year I was a part or the chair for the Apex event, which is a DEIB experience event. And so what the goal of that event was to put on a full day of workshops centered around, again, DEI&B, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so for me, being in the field already, working in a nonprofit, knowing about the different avenues for fundraising and the necessity for it, being able to transfer those skills to the volunteer opportunity was helpful. But again, I think about those volunteers that are within Junior League or within any social group or civic group that you may be a part of, and you have events and there's a learning opportunity. So again, you know that there's an opportunity there to bring in funds for scholarships for your events, there's a need for opportunities to fundraise, to bring in money to support with some of the items that you need for the event. And so with this particular one that I was a part of with Apex, we were able to bring in our sponsorships and then have the pricing of the tickets be greatly reduced. So then our members and also folks from the outside of the league were able to participate. So I think it goes both ways. You can bring what your experience that you may have into a volunteer opportunity or to any other opportunity. But then again, you can also learn from those really valid or impactful volunteer opportunities. And the last thing that I'll add is conferences and workshops like this. I've gone to locally my AFP or Association of Fundraising Professional networking events and their luncheons, and there's always a great speaker that's talking about anything from plan giving to your annual fund plan, or just or what should I do for Giving Tuesday. So there are some things on the local level with AFP, but as well on the global level with AFP with their icon conferences as well. And there's other events that are there. I think if you were to like us or add us on LinkedIn, Ian, Allison, myself, or Chad, and Ian, I saved your invite. But if you add any of us on LinkedIn, we are always sharing new professional development opportunities almost weekly. And so there's another great networking opportunity to log in and share and learn at your own pace, or go to a conference in person to learn more about fundraising.
Great points. I echo that. Yeah, and first point about, you know, kind of getting involved in civic organizations and like getting outside of the silo. I think all of us have probably been engaged with some of those groups at various points in our career. I know I'm a former Rotarian, and you know, all those kind of things. So it's great groups. That's where you get to learn, grow your network, and really stretch. So do love that. Let's go to Ian for your thoughts here on skills.
Yeah, thank you. Just for context, when Andrea was saying, I was giving her a hard time for not accepting my LinkedIn connection. I just updated it. I saw that connection's in. We are once again best friends. So yeah, a lot of really, really good stuff. You know, I kind of look at it a little bit different. I came to the certification game a little bit late. I always tell people, you know, don't rush, do what you got to do. I know there's a lot of people in our sector, whether they're just coming to our sector from another field or whether they're just coming right out of college, that are experiencing a lot of student loan debt, and they see all of these programs out there, graduate certificate programs and advanced degrees and certifications. And I want to tell people to do what's best for them where they are. There's a lot of great free and low cost stuff. You know, I've seen Chad do a ton of webinars. You know, Allison's talked about a lot of things, and Andrew's talked a lot of where you can get a lot of great professional development. You know, go all in on those sorts of things and really build up your foundation. And when you're ready to take something, jump all in. I still feel one of the best development opportunities for anybody in the nonprofit sector, and Allison alluded to this, is to join a committee or a board. There are so many skills you can learn through that experience. You don't just that you just don't find in the classroom or through an online program. And I think we sometimes in the sector demonize our board members. I'll go ahead and say it. I'm on a couple of boards, and it's easy to always point to somebody else and saying they're not doing their job. But when you're doing that role, you start to see how tough it can be to sort of move things and get everyone on the same page. And so I really think there's a huge development opportunity in joining a board. I think one of the things, Chad, you asked about, like, what are maybe some skills that might be crucial. And I believe storytelling is incredibly impactful, whether public speaking or writing. I encourage anybody who's jumping into the sector to take any opportunity you can, no matter where you are in your organization, to step in front of any group, any size group of people, whether it's 5 or whether it's 50, or whether it's 500, just to talk about the work that you do and really develop those public speaking chops and feel comfortable in front of a crowd and feel comfortable answering questions. I think that's a tremendous value as a skill. I think comfort learning ever evolving online platforms. I think we've seen so many of the things that we do now, you know, are online and in the cloud somewhere, and so many companies are merging and they're all connecting or being integrated in some way, and just feeling comfortable in going through and experiencing that. And I think probably the biggest skill that I talk about is the willingness to accept feedback. I know that's one of the hardest things to do as well, but I've seen a lot of studies on a willingness to accept feedback. I know when we do this work and we're passionate about the work that we do and we put in long hours, sometimes it's hard to take any type of criticism or critique. And, you always take criticism for what it's worth and find the value in everything. It's not meant to be a personal attack, hopefully, but I think there's that skill and that willingness to really look at something and kind of discover what are some of those reasons why something didn't meet your expectations or your goals, and think about that. I think is a huge skill to have, and I think that it'll follow you throughout your career.
Great points, Ian. Love it. Yeah. When I think too, like for me, what is it about a fundraiser? Like, what do I need? As you mentioned, I do a lot of training. I teach at 2 colleges. Like, what do I need from someone to be able to teach them fundraising? It's like, it's not rocket science, right? It's all learnable. But what gets in the way is I don't need them to be an extrovert, but I need them to be a people person. I need them to just generally like getting to know people, learning about people, having that curiosity. And then I need a love of learning, like just a lifetime learner, like always trying what's working now, because if you try to do what you learned about fundraising 20 years ago, it's probably not going to work. So those are my 2 points. I thought I'd pause here a little bit too and talk a little bit about some of the certifications. So you see lots of letters after our names. You're probably familiar with CNP. Many of you are, as we've seen in the chat. ACNP is the advanced version of that. On the fundraising side, we kind of have a similar situation. So we have CFRE, Certified Fundraising Executive, and then there's also Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive. So CFRE, correct me if I get anything wrong, panelists, but I believe it's about 3 years of professional practice, maybe around 80-ish hours of continuing education, and then you submit an application, and then you're eligible to sit for the exam. Last I checked, it was still 200 question multiple choice in kind of all aspects of fundraising. Then you recertify every 3 years, just showing that you're continuing to serve the sector, getting that continuing education, ideally speaking, and starting to serve the sector as well. Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive is not necessarily, it's a bit about fundraising, but it's more about serving the sector, leadership, management, ethics, kind of giving back that way. And it's less about, what do I know? Can I put this on my resume? I'm going to get a better job. And it's more about proving to yourself and your process that you are a leader and a servant in this field. So it's much more of a personal mission. I recently completed that back in the spring. There are only 117 in the world. I'm number 117. And I will say, just don't enter the process lightly. It is a process and a journey of self-exploration. So, and Ian's chuckling because he was administering the program when I went through it. And anything to add there, Ian?
Yeah, it's an arduous process. Go in with the time. Again, have the willingness to accept help, get coaching. I mean, we're all experts in our field, but we all need help. And sometimes when we take on something new that's outside the realm of what we normally do every day, we need another perspective and another set of eyes to help us see what we need to see. And I think Chad could attest to that, finding the right coaches and the right people to support them. And it's a huge accomplishment. And, I was incredible to see Chad receive his pin and his medal. And so super excited that he became number 117. And it's just an exciting thing to have in the sector, people pursuing that sort of certification.
Yep. And great point there on mentorship. It's not one of our questions today, but if anybody wants to talk about a mentor as we go along, because I'm sure we all have had many. In our pre-chat, Keely mentioned one of my first ones in college that helped me get the CNP, and I wouldn't have gotten my ACFRE without my mentor, Ben Moeller, that helped me get through there. So those are key aspects all through our journey. But I want to get to our next question, because this one, as Ian mentioned, fundraisers are storytellers. And this one lets everybody tell a little bit of a story. So I'm saying, reflecting on your career, what has been your most challenging campaign, project? How did you navigate it? Put us in your shoes and like what you're thinking, and just, we're in the weeds with you, and walk us through it. And we'll go right back. We'll switch and go to Ian here to start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Yeah, it's reflecting on your career. I think we all can double take when we get asked that question. It's like, okay, let me think about that for a second. As I kind of look back on some of the most challenging things, I think a lot of what we do is challenging, so it's hard to really, nail it down to the top 2 or 3 lists. I think I'm actually probably still recovering from it 20 years later, but it was hands down my first capital campaign. I was a very young executive director. I had about a 10-year career in Boys and Girls Club movement, and worked with Boys and Girls Club and was building a very large facility. And I kind of came in before the campaign started. I was new to the community, like meaning new to the state, new to the city. And in my capital campaign committee, I was surrounded by kind of the who's who of the corporate world and business leaders within that community. And I think, as I met other nonprofit professionals and colleagues in the area, they were kind of saying that this was a dream team capital campaign and how lucky I was. And it was really tough. I think most of what I had to overcome was internal. I don't think imposter syndrome really wasn't a label back then, but I would definitely, looking back now, say that that was the diagnosis today. Being a small nonprofit leader, being a first-time nonprofit leader in a sea of Fortune 500 executives, business leaders, well-known philanthropist in the area was intimidating and a little overwhelming. To navigate that, and to Chad's point, I turned to a mentor and I turned to somebody to help me get to where I was. And to really navigate that uncertainty, I just started really listening to not just what the goals of the campaign were, but the challenges of the project, and the challenges they were experiencing, in order to find where I could add value and ultimately find my voice within this very intimidating group. This committee knew they could easily, it was always kind of internally, it's like, we can easily raise this $8 million and hit this goal, and we're going to go over. And I mean, there was a lot of, patting on the back before we even started. But they really struggled with relating to the community where we were going to have this, or build this new building. They really struggled with interacting with the community groups, the neighborhood groups and associations, partnering with communities of color, truly understanding the needs of youth at the time. And I really saw that as my my opportunity to utilize my youth development background, my social work experience, to help navigate those challenges and get both sides to the table, so we could create something that was not only impactful for the community, but that was unique at the time as well. And so, we see ourselves in these positions throughout our career where we feel like maybe we're the smallest person at the table or have the quietest voice. And I think there's always moments where if we really listen, we can see that, there's a space for us to find our voice, and there's a place for us to add value and share our experience. And I don't know if the project would have come together if there wasn't somebody and other people that I helped bring to the table to support me on that, to be able to get these groups to do that. And so it's definitely challenging. It was definitely intimidating. It was definitely something that will stick with me throughout my career.
Thank you, Ian. Great one to kick us off. Let's go to Andrea for a great story here.
All right. And I see a great one in the chat as well, making the wrong pitch to the wrong organization. Research is key, and sometimes we fall into that group of, we just need money, so let's ask everybody. So for me, it is a more recent challenge, and one that I'll be transparent with you all. We're still working through. As an organization or a nonprofit association, what we generally do is build the capacity of other nonprofits that we work with in our entire state. And so we do workshops, capacity building opportunities. We work with leaders around policy and advocacy. We also do research and a number of other things that really help to uplift the nonprofit space here in Tennessee. And so one of the things, as we transition from a regional membership services or association, where we were just in Memphis, Tennessee, and some of the surrounding counties, we are now serving the entire state. And so that is a big transition. And so where we are well known, to say the least, in our neck of the woods here in West Tennessee, we are now having to build a case for support for the entire state. So who are we in Middle Tennessee? Who are we in Knoxville? Without having an actual staff person, potentially in some of those footprint areas. And so as we have looked through and decided what we want to raise for our year, which is around 1.8 million, we had to diversify those avenues that we wanted to bring funding in from. Certainly we stuck with the private foundations and the family foundations. But one of the things that we have really started doing in this year a little bit more robustly than we had done in the past is our corporate sponsorships, or what we now call them our corporate investments. And so in that process, it was really, again, figuring out who are the corporations in each of the regions. And we're still doing that. And who are the foundations in each of these regions, and what are they looking for? And so I think for us having a small team, generally one person, but everyone on the team has that fundraising spirit. So we have a couple of folks that are on our team that will help out and definitely do their part. Our CEO, as well as our chief program officer as well. It is the struggle, or the challenge is kind of ever present. We're still just moving the progress down the line an inch at a time. And so we've had progress and we've had success. So in doing our first, and I'm looking at the booklet now because as many of you, I know if you're fundraisers, you're fundraising and you're thinking about fundraising even as you're on this call. One of the things though that we've had success in was this last month in October, we had our first statewide conference. And I call it success because we had individuals from nonprofits from across the entire state, not just our region here in Memphis or in West Tennessee. And we were able to find sponsors from each of the regions, or at least a good deal of the regions as we move out. So for me, it's a challenge, but it's also, there is a way forward. There is a process. And just really to maybe bring it all forward is that we all will have those challenges. We all will work through it and say, hey, we're building the plane as we're flying it, or trying to find a parachute as we're flying the plane that's probably needing that 2 engines and not just the one. But as we move forward, I think we are finding some progress and we're finding our way. And we also have brought in a fundraising consultant. And so that has been really helpful, where we had maybe known to do the right things in our region. We needed a person that really helped, or a consulting group to help us figure out how do we build a plan that's workable, that's operational with the capacity that we have to really be successful and to raise that 1.8 million. And so with that being said, with our consultant, we're hopefully going to be solidifying and getting, fingers crossed, a plan approved by our board in January. And then we're going to start working that plan. And with that, it's still going to be some challenges, but we're going to work through it because, again, we've also, in this whole time, we've built a fundraising environment, or a fundraising culture, from our board to our staff and to those who are just our kind of community partner and leaders that want to support us and want to see the nonprofit sector succeed, because in the end, the whole community will succeed. So that's yes, there's some challenges, but I try to have a silver lining around it. And hopefully it was helpful to you all as well.
Thank you, Andrea. Great story. Seeing lots of people resonating with building the plane while we are flying it. Seems to be a unfortunate code phrase we use a lot in the sector. So got it. Let's go over to Allison and see what she can add here.
Yeah, I would say probably one of my first kind of development director roles. So I started out in special events, but my first development director role, I came in where they had not had anybody in that role for 6 years. And so I was basically rebuilding their donor base from scratch. And it coincided with a rebrand. So they were 100-year plus organization that had gone through a rebrand, I think 4 years prior. So not only was I, trying to reinvigorate these donors, but like let them know that it's the same organization that they were supporting beforehand. And it was a pretty drastic change in name. So it required a lot of going back to the old donors and kind of rebuilding that trust while finding new donors and balancing what that looks like from a time perspective. I was also only a 30-hour a week, so pretty ambitious for the work that I was doing. And then I would say one of the biggest things I learned too is, and I can't remember who alluded to it, but sometimes you have this thought process of, I just need to get the money in the door. So I was sending out, I was going down all the corporate, I was just sending out packets. And we worked for an organization the organization was, they provided short-term financial assistance for people that were in crisis. So either, chronic poverty or sudden job loss or unexpected medical bills. And I had requested money from Advance Financial. And my executive director was like, maybe not the most aligned, maybe this is somebody that, has contributed to the people that are coming to us for help. And so that really, I've carried that into every future role in terms of looking at what do we stand for? What are our values and how do we integrate that into gift acknowledgement? So, especially in serving communities at ACNP, we're serving neighbors who have been systemically disenfranchised, right? And so while there are corporations, and they're not a complete amalgamation, I'm sure these corporations have good people in them and do some good work, but they have to, recognize that there's a part of the work that they do that has harmed these individuals. Finding the people that are most aligned with your cause, because I think especially in a polarizing, environment right now, there can be organizations that really worry about being too vocal and who it might off-put, right? But those aren't your people, right? When you're putting out an authentic message, the people that are most inspired to support that work, you will find them regardless. So yes, you may lose some people, but you'll get the people that are going to be most aligned for your cause in the long run.
Thank you, Allison. Completely agree. I'll share a story here as well, and chime in. And then I want to switch us for the remainder time here to be very practical. My goal was to give you all something you can leave with here today and immediately put into action. So I've asked our panel for their best end of calendar year fundraising tip. So we're going to cover that. And I'm seeing a couple good questions in the chat. That we'll go ahead and cover some of those as well. So, but let me give you my story first. So my story, my fundraising challenge, it was my second fundraising job and my first, I call it my first big boy job. So it was my first director of development job. I was 27 and had just spent a couple of years in higher ed learning the ropes, and I get hired by a museum that had kind of just been built and opened about 18 months prior. And I was their first fundraising staff. They didn't have any fundraising staff while they were raising the money. So the board, the volunteers raised $8 million to build this museum and were completely burnt out. So they got it open and they all walked away. And they didn't hire me for 18 months. So what happened? Nobody talked to donors for 18 months, right? And some of these were $500,000 capital campaign donors. So that was my challenge. I mean, what do? You reach out, you introduce yourself, invite them in for a behind the scenes tour, come see your plaque, all of these things. And eventually over the course of the year, I get to meet most of the donors, except for one, and you all know who I hadn't met. It was the biggest one, right? And finally, the opportunity came up and I was able to give him a tour and meet him. And at the end, he handed me an envelope as he went away. And when I opened it, there was a $100,000 check in it with no note, right? And I didn't ask him for any money. And when I connected with him after the fact to say, what prompted that? He told me I had been in the museum 4 times and nobody knew who I was. Nobody, did anything. Nobody invited me. And I had that check with me all 4 times and it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right until somebody took the time to make me feel like a trusted partner and not just the museum's piggy bank. Right. And I tell that story in a lot of presentations because that's kind of like my whole philosophy. In everything we do, how do we make them feel like trusted partners and not just the dollars, like not just working the list, like we were talking about a little bit ago, like taking the time of what's really this relationship like on the other side. So I'm glad I had that experience so early in my career because it really framed a lot of my approach, and now a lot of the approach of how I teach other fundraisers to build those trusted partnerships as well. But maybe that's a little practical, but let's go even more practical and talk, you know, it's end of year here. I call it the last, you know, quarter to the last 6 weeks fundraising Super Bowl. It's 30% of all giving happens in the last 6 weeks of the year. 12% of all giving happens in the last 3 days of the year. So what are some things we should be thinking about? Key activities you should prioritize to really maximize fundraising effort here, especially in these last 6 weeks. And I'll let Andrea kick us off here on this one.
So I am going to give the unconventional answer, I think, and I know Allison and Ian are going to pick up on it, and then they're going to do great. So for me, you know, there's Giving Tuesday, there's all these end of the year campaigns, send the letters, go around, take the baskets, talk to the people. In my mind, what I need to do at the end of the year is really, it's too late to start thinking about 2025 and 2026. So I am already starting to reach out for our conference, our statewide conference is in August of 2025. And I'm ending the year with asking for sponsorship for that event that will be in August of 2025 in Nashville, Tennessee. So Allison, I hope you can be there, and all of our Tennessee people can be there too. So as we move forward, one of the things that we thought about was we had our conference in October. We said, thank you to all the sponsors for giving and really being supportive and really coming and engaging and being a part of the conference. And so we want to continue on that momentum, which our name was Momentum before we changed. So I'm going to use momentum a lot. We want to continue along with that momentum and really get people engaged in funding our next biggest event coming up beyond our Advocacy Summit and our Day on the Hill. The other piece of that is what we are now really thinking about doing is making our collective ask, if you will. And what I mean by that is that we put together kind of a menu of services or menu of events that our organization does. And so instead of just going out and saying, will you fund our conference at $20,000? We're asking, are you interested in funding our conference, our regional summit, and our advocacy day? And telling them, if you give us a check in an envelope with no note, Chad, I'm going to tell them just like that. If you can put a check in an envelope for $100,000, you can have access and you can be a part and partner with us on all 3 of these events. Or again, doing our research on the events that we think will really be directly helpful to or of what their desire would be to serve and to be a part of. And so for me, the end of this year is really going to be focusing on, yes, the end of the year campaigns. Those things are kind of routine for us. And I hope maybe routine for you all. So I'm hoping to hear again from Allison and Chad and Ian on how do I, spark it up a little bit on some of those special things to do at the end of the year, but really thinking forward to 2025 so we can make sure we're ahead of the curve as fundraising gets started for many other organizations. And then also thinking about, are there ways to maximize the donor's time? And instead of asking for one particular event for them to sponsor and be engaged in, are there multiple events that we can do that will help them already cut the check, give us the money, and then also be a part of that planning process for each of those events as well. So I will give that, and I'll probably drop a few other things in the chat, but I will turn it back over to Chad for the actual answer. So I do TV interviews and I answer the question I want to answer. And then I come back and say, did I really answer your question? Was that enough? And the people were like, yeah, fine, whatever. No, but I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Chad.
More power to you. I love it. No, still great insight. Appreciate it. Let's go to Ian for your end of calendar year tips here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting coming off of doing training for the last couple of years to be right back in the mix of thinking about the strategy for end of the year giving. I think, going through a transition, a leadership transition, there's always a little bit of worry. There's always a little bit of concern. So many donors have personal relationships with nonprofit leaders, and that personal relationship is just as important as their connection to the mission. So there's always a little bit of fear you're going to lose some donors. And this is obviously not the time you want to do that. So for me, it's been pretty much a running start, making sure that anytime there's a leadership transition, we know just things don't get done. We know things have been kind of put to the side. We know a leader might be already looking forward to their next job, and that was one of the case with me. They were holding the job for that person, and so they were anxious to get started, and they kept asking me, do you still need me to be around, because we had a little bit of a couple-week transitioning period. So I know there's a lot of communication and a lot of one-on-one meetings. And to Chad's point from his story, there's a lot of people that have been extremely impactful and been incredibly and beneficial to the organization that need to feel that that they're part of the group, they're part of the shared story, and that's why they invest in your organization. So making sure you take the time, and because donors are really looking for those personalized experiences, and take stewardship seriously. I think we need to take an opportunity to redefine how we do stewardship. We know some people are incredibly busy. We know people on the call are wearing many hats. Sometimes we feel like when we've checked a box and we send out a tax letter or thank you letter, that's all I can do right now, and I'll come back to that person. And we need to start understanding that we need to integrate stewardship in everything we do. I mean, I come from the generation where it was ingrained in you that take every Friday and write a thank you note to your donors and end the week that way. And but we gotten busier, and we're involved in so many other things. And so please take a look at your stewardship, make that a priority for the end of the year, figure out how you can personalize those experiences with your donors. A couple other practical things that I'm really big on is reminding your donors the impact they have. And you can do that through those stewardship pieces. You got to prime the pump. They need to know that they've made an impact throughout the year, but you also have to let them know some of the needs that still exist and how they can end the year strong with you as a donor and as a key stakeholder in your organization. Let them know the needs that exist, and remind them of their power and their influence to meet those needs. And I think that creates a nice runway for you to have a successful end of the year campaign.
All great tips. I love the incorporation still of some stewardship there, right? Like, yes, it's the asking season, we need to extend that, but it doesn't just have to be ask, that's 5 emails in a row, like just the same thing. Like, no, we can still tell some stories. We can infuse that. We can use the story letter in our appeal and maybe have like a video that highlights that from another voice. Like, it's still a time we can have creativity and not just like yell give at our donors 25 times in the last couple of weeks here. So.
Yeah, Chad, if I could just add one more thing onto that, just really quick. I mean, we've all received those emails or those texts saying, it's 10 minutes till Giving Tuesday's over. And you're like, okay, somebody else is up at 10 minutes till midnight. That's fantastic. Maybe your last text or your last email should be, talking about the success of your Giving Tuesday, because that'll inspire someone to give more than possibly just you still have time to grab your credit card in your pajamas. So we want to make sure you're looking to inspire people to go along on this journey with you. And sometimes an inspirational message is their trigger to say, oh, I meant to give to this today.
Okay, great point. Donors give the strength, not weakness. They want to see that you're doing well and they want to be a part of that, right? So great. Let's go to Allison for her end of calendar year tips.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it has already been touched on. I was really gonna lean heavy on the stewardship piece. I do think that one of the biggest mistakes that fundraisers make is that they wait until the end of the year and then do an ask without really warming up their donor pool or doing any previous like thinking. And so I do think, like, especially around Thanksgiving, like really leaning heavy on like how much the previous gifts have meant to your organization, personalized outreach to the donors. We have like a lot of volunteers coming through the free store. So we're currently doing like a campaign where we send a picture of their group team and specifically talk about like how many shoppers they reached, that day and how much we were able to distribute with their help. So again, kind of pairing that impact report with like thanking them for the work that they do. For our Giving Tuesday, we have never really done a great job of like getting a bunch of money in. I don't know if it's like the vehicles, but that's something that we've been really toying around with. And so, but last year we did every hour was a different focus. So like 1 hour was the corporate groups that had served in the free store. 1 hour was the youth that we served during our career exploration program. 1 hour was the company that helped us with picking up furniture donations across the city. So like each hour was like a different area of impact. So we were able to share really everything that we had done. And obviously, when you have a fully functioning organization that's operating on all cylinders, you're probably doing that a lot, like in monthly newsletters and stuff. But because we are kind of small, sometimes those things take a little bit of a backseat. I would also say that now is a good time to really get big on your like donor notes and things, gearing into your next development strategy. Like make sure you're going through and you're adding all the gifts that were given, any notes that you've had through your conversation, so that you do have a better like approach into the next year. Again, it's so busy that those things can fall by the wayside, but then it's hindering the relationship if you don't keep track of those things moving forward, because those little things really add up and make a difference. And yeah, I would just really highlight inclusive holiday messages, not just Christmas-centric messages, to make sure that everybody feels like appreciated during the holiday season.
Great. Thank you, Allison. All great tips. I love how stewardship's been infused through here. And I'm just gonna flip the script and go super, super practical. Like for the brand new development person that I'm all on my own. It's the first time I've ever had to do this. I can kind of see what they did last year, but I don't really know what to do. I'm gonna put it in the chat. This is my starting point with any client that's a small shop. Like, just what do you do? So, you got to get something in their postal mailbox. That even if they're an online donor, it kind of all works together. You want them to be multi-channel. You follow up via email. You do some personalized outreach, like who typically gives by December 15th, but isn't in yet this year. This is not an email blast. This is a call. This is a personal email from maybe the executive director. And then those last 3 days with all the giving, you have email blasts set up, ready to roll. And the one everybody always forgets, it's an exhausting time of year. And we go into the new year, and what do? We just send the same thank you letter we've been sending for the last 9 months. But you have this huge pile of them going out, perfect time for a fresh story. Like just back in October, this family came through and had this, I was walking down the hall the other day and stumbled across something amazing. Like just share one of these great stories and really kick off the new year with folks feeling like, yeah, I gave to the right place. This is an organization that I deeply care about. And I want to continue to support here in 2025 as we go forward. Well, folks, we're just about wrapped up here. There are some great questions in the chat, so I'm going to hand it over to Keely to wrap things up here in a minute or so. But I'm going to encourage my fellow panelists, if you want to go through and respond to anything you see in there. There was a great question on prospect identification a bit ago, like where do we find our first prospects? And thank you, Allison. I saw you had a fabulous reply there. And I think we're all open to you all connecting with us. LinkedIn's probably the primary area for most of us, but feel free to reach out. I think somebody said earlier, we all put out content, tips, webinars. It's mostly other people's stuff that we just think is really good and want you to see. So connect, and a great way to get that ongoing professional development. But thank you all for your service to the field, and thanks for joining today. And I'll kick it back to Keely.
Yes, thank you, Chad, and thank you, panelists, for sharing today your experiences and your wisdom. We so appreciate it. To emphasize Chad's point, please connect with these excellent thought leaders. We included their LinkedIn profiles earlier in the chat, so those are there. And we will also have a follow-up email that goes to everyone who registered, as well as attendees for today. And we'll probably include those LinkedIn links there as well, so you can look up our panelists and our moderator there. So again, thank you everyone for your attention today. Thank you for those questions. Thank you to our panelists and our moderator. Look for that email that'll come out with the recording. Also, if you're gearing up for more professional development, more learning early on in 2025, keep your eyes peeled for information about Elevate 2025. We hope to see you there. And also, you know, the Association of CNPs, they are busy getting to work planning out our live event schedule for 2025. So if you have any ideas for any sessions that the association should focus on, any topics, please do not hesitate to reach out with those ideas to cnpcredential@nla1.org. So that's all we have for y'all today. Have a great afternoon, and we'll be in touch. Thanks again.